After arguably the craziest / most surprising Call of Duty event of all time, at least in my mind, you guys already know what time it is. We're going to be doing the post Major 2 team tier list / power ranking. But before we get into it, I just want to say thank you guys, because we are very close to 40,000 subs on YouTube. We might actually hit it by the time this video goes live. But if you guys are enjoying the content, I'd appreciate if you would hit the sub button, because we are close to Octane. Well, not really, but we are gaining, and we are gaining at a very fast pace. We will pass him by the end of this year. Now, we get into the power rankings. As I'm starting the tier list, guys, I do want to preface with saying that this isn't just the Major 2 that is taken into account. This is everything from the beginning of the season up until this point. Okay, so keep that in mind. But for the first team, which is actually the worst team in the league, is going to be Paris Legion. They are going to be in the D tier, and they're going to be in the D tier by themselves. Not only are they dead last in the CDL standings, they only have 2 series wins. And I know, okay, they made some roster moves, and they have been more competitive for sure, but they still haven't proven anything to me. I don't think that they can beat any team realistically, consistently at this point. They just got 9 through 12th at the Major. They only won 1 series in the qualifying matches. And I just think this team lacks a lot. Next up, in the first team that will be in the C tier is honestly quite shocking to me, because in my last tier list, I had them at 5th overall, and they went all the way down to the 11th best team. 11th best team or second worst team? But they are ranked 11th, and it is the Toronto Ultra. Now, this Toronto team, they didn't start out the year bad at all. After their first match of the Major 2 qualifiers, they had an overall series record of 5-5. They got top 4 at the first Major. Yeah, they didn't win a hardpoint there, but their hardpoint wasn't, I mean, it wasn't good, but it wasn't like, oh, this could be the absolute worst hardpoint team in the game. And since then, they have not won a series. They have an overall record of 5-10. Their hardpoint has somehow gotten worse than it was prior. And it's just like this Toronto Ultra team, when you look at them, especially the success they had last year, nobody in the beginning of this game, in the beginning of Vanguard, would have thought that they ever would have been in the bottom 4. They are 6-20 in hardpoint. They can't win a hardpoint against damn near any team in the league, it seems like. I mean, they lost to Paris Legion in the qualifiers. I don't know what's wrong with this team, but not only have they just fallen off a cliff, they got 9 through 12th at the second Major, and I just can't believe it. The second team that I have joining the Toronto Ultra in the C tier, and you could argue that maybe they are even worse than Toronto Ultra, but in my opinion, they have the exact same issue. It's the Minnesota Rocker coming in at number 10. Now, look, guys, Minnesota also has been very poor at hardpoint this year. Not much better than Toronto Ultra. They are currently 6-17 in the league. Their S&D, once again, is good. They are one of the best S&D teams, in my opinion. They're sitting at 11-7, and then Control, they have a, it's a little bit below average, a 5-8 record. But the thing with Minnesota is, especially as of late, because Toronto is just on a complete landslide down to the bottom of the tier list, they're relatively competitive in hardpoints. They lose a lot, but it's not in the same fashion that Toronto Ultra loses theirs, in my opinion. Now, it doesn't really matter. I don't need to talk much about this team, because once again, I've said this multiple times, they have to make a multiple person swap if they want to get any sort of success, if they want to even be like a good team in the league. Minnesota, they come in at number 10, and that means we're moving on to number 9. The number 9 team, also in the C tier, I have the New York Subliners. Now look, NYSL looked great in the qualifying matches after they picked up Paul X. In fact, they went from 0-2 to 3-2, actually starting in the winner's bracket, and in the qualifying matches with Paul X, they didn't lose a hard point. The only issue with that is the 3 teams that they played with Paul X, well, they weren't too good themselves. It was the Minnesota Rocker, the Paris Legion, and the Toronto Ultra. The biggest takeaway for this NYSL team, even though they have lack of sample size, was the second Major. And I actually thought that they were going to perform quite well honestly. I thought they were going to shock a lot of people. I believe I had them as the dark horse going into the event, but it didn't pan out that way. Not in the slightest. They played Atlanta FaZe in the first round of the winners bracket. 3-0 body bagged. Wasn't even close. And then they fell down to the losers bracket where they went up against LAT. I actually had NYSL beating LAT because LAT has been struggling for a while now. But yet, NYSL couldn't even get the dub on them. They got reverse swept. They went up 2-0. They lost the next 3 maps to an already struggling LAT team. So I can't really move them any further up on this list. And I don't know if they can with Paul X. But for now, I have them coming in at number 9. And then the last team in the C tier, the 8th ranked team currently in Vanguard, I have the Los Angeles Thieves. Now, before I hear any enable your bias, let me break it down for y'all. Even though I actually don't know how I could be biased because I'm putting them this low, especially when you compare it to where I had them at the last tier list, even though they did look a lot better during that video. LAT's been struggling. They didn't win a match in the Major 2 qualifiers. I know people say this all the time. Ake says it. He uses a Fast and Furious quote. What is it? If you win by an inch or by a mile, doesn't matter, win's a win. That is not necessarily true. At least when you're doing these power rankings, okay, in these tier lists. You can lose or win dominantly, and you can win or lose by the skin of your teeth, okay? That is LAT's issue. They are very poor right now. Not like literally, you know, because 100T has a lot of cash, but they've been performing very poor. But when you look at their losses in the qualifiers, they have a 3-0 to London. They got bodied. They have a 3-2 to LAG, a 3-2 to Minnesota, a 3-2 to Optic, where they got reverse swept. And then they lost 3-1 to Seattle. Okay? They have 3 series that could have gone in their favor. And even if you think, well, no, enable, they would have lost. It doesn't matter if it was 3-2. At least the series was competitive. And that goes for every other team as well, not just LAT. And then when you look at the second major of the year, they reverse swept NYSL. And then they end up going against Optic in losers round 2, where they got reverse swept again by them. Yes, there was plenty of blunders. Yes, Optic clutched up. I mean, Optic outslayed the living hell out of them. And I think that's LAT's biggest issue right now, is they've just been getting outslayed by every team. I think any team in this C tier can beat any other team on any given Sunday. It doesn't matter. But LAT has still been better than the rest of these teams. And I don't think you can argue that. From the beginning of the game to now, I think LAT have been better than NYSL, better than Minnesota, better than Toronto, obviously better than Paris Legion. But yeah, they fall under the same category, where I think that a team change is necessary at this point. I think they have to make one if they want to improve, if they want any form of success. And since I want to see them do well, I hope they do make a team change. Coming in at number 7, and the first team in the B tier is going to be Seattle Surge. Now, they have made some improvements in my tier list from the last one, and they had a relatively good second major. Now, there were some unfortunate scenarios that happened with Matt getting sick. Classic had to fill in, but Seattle Surge are trending upwards, I would say. In fact, in the second major, they start out hot with a huge upset over, going into this event, the best team in the game, Optic. They 3-0'd them. Then they fell to Atlanta FaZe, who I had as the second best team in the game, 3-2 in a very close game 5. And they fell down into the losers bracket. They had to use Classic, who, to be fair, he played pretty well. And they lost 3-2 to the hottest team in that moment. The LAG, the Los Angeles Guerrillas, whatever. I don't know why I said the LAG. LAG was on their Cinderella story, okay? Their miracle run. Seattle fell short. They are definitely better than all the teams below them, but I'm still not sold. The 6th best team in the game right now, I have the Florida Mutineers. They played very well at the second major. They had a huge upset in the first round. They beat London 3-0. And then they fell to Boston 3-2 in a very close series before falling to the losers bracket, where they beat Optic Texas. They sent Optic home in a 3-1 series victory. And then they were the next victim on LAG's miracle run, where they lost 3-2. A game 5 where they were actually up 5-3, I believe, and they threw it away. But here's the thing. This was still a good weekend for the Florida Mutineers. So I think for them, B tier is very, very solid. Okay. It's not the D tier. It's not the C tier. They're definitely better than those teams, at least as of late, but still way too inconsistent to put them ahead of any other team, in my opinion. Now, the first team in the A tier and the number 5 team in the game right now is going to be the Los Angeles Guerrillas. And I feel like I'm going to have people on both sides of the fence here. There's going to be people that are going to say, Enable, they just won the event. How do you have them sitting at number 5? And on the opposite side of that, there's going to be people saying, Enable, how are they this high up? They had a miracle run. You know, this is something that can't be replicated. I think it was, for lack of better words, a fluke win, even though I wouldn't say that, but I'm saying you guys, some of you are probably thinking it. Well, I'll explain both sides. For one, they had a substitute in Spark, which, if anything, you would think I would give them more credit, which is an unbelievable feat, first off. But no other team had any sort of VOD on them, especially when it came to S&D. And going into it, they have a lot less pressure on them. Okay, they have nothing to lose. You know, Gunless obviously couldn't play. Spart, you know, you're not expecting him to necessarily fill Gunless's shoes, even though he is a great player, a young player. And they just haven't had the same amount of practice as all the other teams, right? So the whole team can go in with no pressure on their shoulders, no pressure, no weight on their shoulders. And whatever happens, happens mentality, right? They also set the CDL record for most S&D wins in a row at 10 or 11. I forget the exact total. But the whole thing, the whole point of it is this team reminds me, and I'm going to roll the tapes back for y'all, give you a little history lesson, of FaZe in World War II. And CJ, I actually want you to pull this bracket up as well. This is the Stage 1 playoffs from World War II, where FaZe consisted of Zuma, Attach, Replays, and Priesta. Okay, and this is how it went down. They lost in winners bracket round 1 to TK 3-1, where they went into losers bracket round 1. Very similar to the LAG team. And then they went on to beat Envy 3-2, E United 3-2, before they faced TK again and beat them 3-0. Then they beat LG 3-2. And while their series in the finals versus a clearly better team at the time, Optic Gaming, went 3-2, 3-2. It wasn't a best of 9. It was 2 best of 5s. And the series was a lot closer. They made it that far because they kept clutching up in their game 5s. Okay, and they went on to win that event. Obviously, Enable. But here's the thing. After that event that they won on the back of clutching up in game 5s, they placed 9 through 12 at Seattle. Then at Anaheim, they placed 5th through 6. Then they got 7th, 8th in the Stage 2 qualifying matches. And then they got 5th, 6th at Stage 2 playoffs. Okay? So they weren't a bad team by any means in the game, but they weren't the best. They had a miraculous run, a Cinderella story, very similar to this LAG team. So I wouldn't be surprised if LAG went to the next major and say got 5th through 6th or 7th through 8th. It doesn't matter. I don't think that they can replicate how they won this event. And that's fair because I don't think any team could. Okay, it's not a shot at LAG, but they just had to show me more. This wasn't a dominant win. Okay, this wasn't like an easy walk to the finals where they just beat everybody through winners bracket. Yes, they had a fantastic series versus Atlanta FaZe, but we all know that this is a 1 in a million scenario. But on the opposite side of that, I do think, especially if they stay with Spart, this team is going to be a team where they might not win 10 or 11 S&Ds in a row again, but they're going to be a very good S&D team with Spart, or even if the team keeps Gunless. I don't know what their plan is. I think they're going to use this win to gain confidence, have momentum moving forward, And I think it's really hard to put them on the same tier as a Florida or Seattle in the B tier, especially after coming off a win. Even if it was a crazy win, I think you have to give them a certain level of respect. So that's why I have them in the A tier, but coming in at the number 5 spot. Moving on to number 4, I have Boston Breach. They are going to be also joining the A tier alongside LAG. And here's the thing. I know they just got 3rd at the second major. They got 5th, 6th at the first major. And they have been looking great. They're currently 4th in the CDL standings, 10 points behind the London Royal Ravens for the 3rd spot. But there's one big issue with this Boston team, and it's why I can't move them any higher than 4th right now, is their strength of schedule just hasn't been very difficult. They really haven't beat any top teams, in my opinion, so far in this game. Just to give you guys a breakdown. In Major 1, they played Atlanta FaZe in the first round. They lost 3-0, where they fell to a loser's bracket. At the time, they were going up against a very, very lackluster Florida team, where they won 3-2. Then they got to go up against another horrible team in Paris Legion, where they won 3-1, before falling to Toronto, who couldn't win a hard point. They lost to them 3-2, but they got 5th, 6th at the event. Okay, not a bad placing, especially for this Boston Breach team. They didn't play anyone good. And I know you can only play who's in front of you. I get that. So this is no fault to Boston at all. It's just they really didn't beat anyone that could actually contend for a win. And then when you look at the Major 2 qualifiers, they went 4-1, where they beat the Florida Mutineers. Then they lost to the London Royal Ravens 3-1. They beat Minnesota 3-0, Seattle Surge 3-1, and Toronto Ultra 3-2. So they went 4-1. But realistically, they beat every team that they should beat. So I just think Boston has a very low ceiling compared to the rest of these teams, but they're still the 4th best team in the game. And that means moving on to the 3rd spot. Newsflash, the top 3 teams in the game have not changed, but London is coming in at number 3, and they are the last team in the A tier. Now, I know what you're going to say. Enable, London got dismantled at the second major. They got 7th, 8th, and it was a very, very abysmal performance out of them. They got upset by Florida in the first round before falling to loser's bracket, beating Paris 3-1, and then they lost to the champs LAG 3-0. And it wasn't relatively close. But like I said, this isn't just off of the major. This is what we've seen so far this year. And going into Major 2, they went 4-1 in qualifiers, where they beat Boston Breach, they beat LAT, they beat NYSL, they beat Paris Legion, and they lost to Atlanta FaZe. So they went 4-1. They actually had the 2nd seed. They had a 65% map win-loss. And they're currently sitting at the number 3 spot in the CDL standings. So yeah, it was a rough weekend for them. It was a rough weekend for a couple teams. They're not the only team that underperformed majorly, but I still don't know if I can make any crazy moves with this London team, because so far, majority of the year, they've been a top 3 team. And I think this was just one of those hiccups. You know, they learned from it. I saw that they didn't get great practice. Players had COVID, yada, yada, yada. But I have London at number 3. And moving on to the S tier, where there's only 2 teams. You guys know who they are. It is Optic and FaZe. Now, hear me out. I think this is more of a 1A, 1B situation. People could think Optic are still the best team in the game, because while they got 5th, 6th at the Major 2, they got upset, had a way worse tournament than the Atlanta FaZe. They still won the first major. They went 5-0 in the qualifiers, and they had a rough weekend, just like London Royal Ravens. I see that, and I understand your argument if that's why you would have them above Atlanta FaZe, even though Atlanta FaZe made it to back-to-back finals. Because even though they did, they got smoked in both finals. They got smoked by Optic. They got smoked by LAG 5-2 in both series. And in the qualifiers leading up to the second major, Atlanta FaZe went 3-2. They actually had the 5th seed in the tournament. So I personally have Optic at 1B and Atlanta FaZe at 1A. Like I said, though, if you have Optic at 1A and FaZe at 1B, I wouldn't argue, but I hope you could understand the other side of that. And I value consistency. Okay, I do. I know they didn't win, and I know they got absolutely embarrassed in both grand finals. But no matter what, no matter if OAKBOYZ was playing bad, Simp was playing bad, they both were playing bad, RCs was playing bad. Literally all of them have played well below their expectations besides Celium, and they still made it to back-to-back finals. They didn't win. But not only are they in the finals at both events, they're currently sitting at first in the CDL standings, but I see both sides. So as long as you can see both sides to that, we're A-okay, even if you think that Optic has the slight edge. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Both of these teams are S tier. I think they are the only S tier teams. Those are my power rankings / tier list. As always, guys, I appreciate the love. I want your opinions on how you think I did. I think I did pretty damn well. And I know most of y'all are probably going to say I'm fucking faded, but I appreciate the love.